I have something that I rarely tell people because it's awful, and it took me years to process it. I'm a hardworking, salt-of-the-earth type man. I don't have the time nor the desire to watch ghost shows, play with demon boards, or whatever they're called. I have a business to run. I've owned a successful pest control company for 15 years now, and I'm proud to have built it from the ground up. I started with nothing and now have 50 employees and a near impeccable customer satisfaction rating. The incident I referred to happened in the first couple years I started my business. I got a call from an elderly woman who later complained about having a fly infestation. Elderly people always tug at my heartstrings because my grandparents raised me, and they didn't have a lot of money. We had cockroaches, fleas, mice, and all kinds of pests in that tiny trailer they raised me in. So, I can't turn the elderly down, no matter how bad the job is. Fly infestations typically mean the job will be nasty. Flies breed and feed in filth like trash, feces, spoiled food, that kind of thing. I was expecting the worst, but willing to do my best for this woman in need. I drove over to her house, and it was in a nice neighborhood and looked nice from the outside. She had a nice flower garden and a white picket fence closing in the backyard. The house was probably built in the 1950s, but it looked like it was in great shape. But you can't judge a book by its cover, so I anticipated the worst inside. I knocked on the door, and the sweetest little old lady answered. She mentioned she lived alone, and it was hard for her to go up and down the stairs, so she hadn't been down there in a while. This is what I was expecting to hear, so I told her I'd take care of the problem. I asked her if the problem was exclusively in the basement, and she mentioned that sometimes they come up to the main level as well. I did some light routine spraying around to deter bugs from coming up, and sprayed the outside perimeter of the house with some heavy-duty bug killer. Now it was time to go downstairs. I got all my equipment on, went full hazmat, and prepared to walk into the pit of hell. When I opened the door to the basement, I was expecting the smell to be horrendous, but it didn't have much of a smell at all. Just damp and old-smelling. I walked down the stairs and turned on the light to the basement. There was lots of non-perishable food, but no real smell. I kept looking around, but didn't find anything out of the ordinary. I also didn't see a single fly. I went upstairs and told the old woman I was going to check her attic for bugs. She insisted that they were coming from the basement. I told her I wanted to cover all bases and climbed up the ladder into the attic. The attic didn't show any signs of infestation either. There was an occasional dead bug, but it was much cleaner than I was expecting. I sprayed some stuff up there just to be safe and headed back down the ladder. I told the old woman I didn't see any sign of infestation, and she said they only come up at night. Keeping in mind that she was old, I told her that I sprayed and took care of the problem, and that if she had any other issues, to let me know. That same night, I got a call from the old lady. She sounded scared and kept yelling, "They're coming, they're coming." I immediately got in my truck and headed to her house. I grabbed my gear and knocked on the front door. She yelled, "Thank God you're here," as she opened the door. She brought me over to the basement door, and sure enough, there were lots of flies gathered around the basement door. I told her to get in the other room because I was going to spray. I sprayed the flies and they dropped dead. I opened the basement door all the way, and down into the basement there were flies buzzing all around. I sprayed as I walked down, killing all the flies. Finally, I got downstairs and it was absolutely covered in flies. I've never seen so many flies. I sprayed and sprayed until I finally had to go back to my truck and refill my tank. After refilling the tank, I grabbed the vacuum as well so I could suck up all the dead flies. I made my way down the stairs, vacuuming up dead flies along the way. As I got back to the basement, I must have been vacuuming up hundreds of flies every minute. It was unbelievable. Then all of a sudden, all the lights went out, and I saw a pale, white glowing girl with long black hair. She had the most wicked look in her eyes. I was in shock, and I yelled, "Get out of here! Leave me alone!" Then the lights came back on, and she disappeared. I ran upstairs and was going to leave, but the thought of leaving that poor old woman alone with that thing didn't seem right. Plus, I had left all my equipment in the basement. After about 5 minutes of catching my breath, I went back downstairs and finished vacuuming the flies up, sprayed again for good measure, and told the old woman I was finished. About a week later, she called me and thanked me. She said that she hasn't seen a fly since, and that she would let her friends know about my services. I hung up the phone and tried not to give it any more thought, but I'll never forget that girl's face. I work at a national park in Kentucky. It's called Mammoth Cave. Mammoth Cave is a massive cave system currently known as the most extensive cave system in the world. It has over 420 miles of explored tunnels, and it's still expanding. The portion outside of the cave is a large park as well. It's a great place to take a family on vacation. Families can hike, kayak, and explore the cave. However, as I say this, I also preface with being cautious of your time inside the cave. I've worked at many parks throughout my career. I specialize in war history, specifically weaponry. Mammoth Cave was an exciting placement for me. The bats that live in the cave produce guano, a key component in potassium nitrate, better known as saltpeter, used during earlier wars. Enslaved people were forced to mine it. Several artifacts from that period have been recovered from the cave. I'm not typically one to believe in wild tales, but after my encounter, I've been hoping to make sense of what I saw. Honestly, though, it's led me to believe that many things in our big world are unexplainable. Anyhow, I digress. Part of working the caves means giving tours. Tours become monotonous very quickly. Tourists are always asking the same questions and giving out the same answers over and over. Rinse and repeat. I always try to be engaging, to elicit good tips. It was a Tuesday, and the second tour I had given that morning. I had a relatively large group of people. Part of the group was a family of 3, mom, dad, and a girl about 10. The family was relatively quiet, but seemed engaged throughout the tour. Of course, the cave comes with its legends. Some of these are spirits that haunt the cave, but I never give this much thought. I never even considered that there was such a thing as a ghost. I've always felt that ghosts were a bunch of hoopla created by simple-minded people. I would, of course, tell the stories in the hope of engaging my audience, but I had never seen anything to make me believe there was any truth to it. As I led my group to the haunted chamber, I noticed the temperature changed. The temperature change seemed odd because the cave always keeps a consistent 54 degrees once inside and away from the entrance. Over my time working in the cave system, I'd become accustomed to the temperature. I remember thinking that perhaps I was getting sick. As I began speaking to the group, the internal light system glitched. The lights were not going off, but they were dimming. Lights dimming was unusual. During this, I glanced at the family standing before me to the right. The daughter suddenly pitched forward like someone had shoved her from behind. Her dad's quick reflexes saved her from a fall. I asked her if she was okay, and she said that someone had pushed her. The strange thing was, her family was to the side and no one was behind them. I checked that she was okay and had my partner continue with the group while I attended to this family. As I leaned down in front of the girl, rocks started shuffling behind her. Small stones about the size of driveway gravel began rolling. The ground was unlevel in this chamber section, but not enough for the previously undisturbed stones to move. I told the family we should catch up with the group and leave now. As we exited the chamber, I saw someone's back as they rounded a rock outcropping. Thinking that this was another tour member trying to be funny by being disruptive within a historic site, I quickly returned to the area to confront the hoodlum. No one was there. The entire room was empty except for myself. There was nowhere someone could have hidden or gone to escape. I'm nervous, anxious, and a little sick at this point. I quickly caught up to the group, and luckily we were at the end of the tour. I took the rest of the day off and debated returning to work the next day. I'm unsure if it was the girl or the time we were there or me. I have no idea, but there is truly something supernatural inside Mammoth Cave. We hear lots of stories up in these woods, and I never believed them until this past year. See, I live up in Baudette, Minnesota. It's up on the Canadian border near Lake of the Woods. There's a Pine Island State Forest just south of town and the Rainy River to the north. That's also the Canadian border. Because of the river, it's the walleye capital of the world, home of Willie the Walleye. Point is, there's not much up here except the town. I mean, you go south into Minnesota and there's nothing until Red Lake. It's woods, mostly. In the winter, it's cold, like to the point where you have to plug in your car at night if you want it to start in the morning. I travel a lot by snowmobile in the winter. It's just easier. Baudette's got about 1,000 people, which is about 1,000 people too many for me. So I got me a house on the edge of town. My buddy Derek, he lives even farther out, not even in the city limits. He's not even on city water. People say Derek's crazy, but me? I just think he sees things other people don't see, you know? He pays attention. He doesn't have a smartphone or any of that. He watches things in the woods. One day last winter, I went out to see him because my grandma said my deer meat was taking up too much room in her freezer. I figured I'd bring him some and we could have a couple of beers and talk maybe. I took the snowmobile because I can take a shortcut through the woods that way and I don't have to worry about whether the county plowed Derek's street. I set out later than I meant to because, of course, Grandma wanted me to shovel the walk first. It was December, and it gets dark around 4 o'clock. When I finally got the meat loaded and got on the snowmobile, the trees were already making long shadows on the snow. I almost didn't go, but if I tried to go the next day, she'd do the same thing. I got on the snowmobile, put on my helmet, and hit that path through the woods. The light lit up the trail pretty good, but I still took it slow. You never know when a deer might run out in front of you, and that could be the end. So I was going pretty slow, just watching the trees go by, when something did jump out on the trail. Jump isn't really the right word. The thing strolled. It was a good 20 or 30 feet in front of me, but my snowmobile light lit it up real good. Still, I couldn't believe what I saw. It must have been 9 feet tall. I mean, I could see it was as tall as one of the pine trees. At first, I thought it must be some kid messing around because nothing has antlers and stands on 2 feet. But this was no kid with a costume. It had a skull for a face. I got one look into those empty eye sockets, and I almost fell off the snowmobile. I never remember ever being that scared. But just when I was trying to decide if I should turn around or not, it disappeared. It didn't walk away. It was just gone. So of course, I wondered if it had ever been there at all. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I thought I saw it, but once it was gone, I had my doubts. I told myself it was a weird hallucination and kept going. But when I got to the spot where it was, I smelled something rotten. Like when hamburger meat goes bad in the fridge, except worse. Much worse. It lasted for only a second though, so I told myself I was imagining things again. I blew past that spot and kept going to Derek's house. Like I said, his house is basically in the woods. He's got a dish on the side for the TV and a bunch of wood piled up on the other side for the fireplace. That's the only heat he's got, so I just leave my jacket on when I go inside. He just had me put the frozen deer outside in the snow before I went in. Once we had a couple beers, I told him what I saw. He said, "Yeah, that's the Wendigo." Now I heard some stories about the Wendigo, but I don't know what to believe, so I asked him. He said all he knew was it wandered around the woods, quiet as death. He saw it out his window sometimes, but it never came up to his house because he made a circle of salt around it. Salt keeps all kinds of evil away, he said. I figured it was worth a try. I was scared to go home after that because, of course, by the time I left, it was full dark. I didn't see anything on the way home, though. I did smell that rotten meat when I passed that spot, though. I'll tell you what, when I got home, I got out the rock salt that I use on the sidewalk and made a circle all the way around the house. Nothing happened for a while, though, and I kind of forgot about the whole thing. Spring comes slow up here, but it did finally come. And when the snow melted, I forgot to do the salt again. One morning I looked out the window and there was a dead rabbit on the lawn. Like, not just dead, torn to pieces. And other people around town started saying they found the same thing. Rabbits, squirrels, even cats. I went out and did that salt circle around my house again. After that, I didn't find any more dead animals, but other people did. They tried to say it was wolves, but wolves don't do that. Wolves eat what they kill. They don't just tear it up. I know it was the Wendigo. Derek says so too.